I knew in 2018 that Queen Elizabeth II hated Meghan Markle. Now, that's a strong word to use, I appreciate, but you will remember I was the first in the world to report the fact that the now late Queen was horrified by the way the fake Duchess was acting in the run-up to her wedding. At that point, the Royal Rota were completely on side with Harry and Meghan. At that point, there was no sense that they were going to report how the Queen really felt in that moment at Windsor Castle. But I felt the world had a right to know. So that's why I hope you trust me when I say that these new reports coming out about exactly how the Queen felt, even though it's 8 years after the fact, mean something. They are part of history. Because what it shows you is that the late Queen Elizabeth II had worked out the truth about Ms. Markle before any of the mainstream media were onto this. And trust me, it was nothing to do with racism. Brittany from the Royal News Network joins me now. Brittany, we're going to do a deep dive today into exactly how the Queen felt about Meghan Markle. And when I say she hated her, I know some people will think that is a strong word, Brittany, but I just want to explain what I mean. Because she certainly didn't hate Meghan Markle when she first met her. In fact, she welcomed her with open arms. She tried to give Meghan access to her main advisors, some of the closest people in her world. But by the time of the wedding, by the time that she had figured out that this was a woman who was marrying into the royal family, not for love, Brittany, not for love, but to further her own career. And when she saw, and this I think is the key point for me, when she saw the way that this woman had changed her grandson forever, had destroyed the relationship between brothers, had destroyed the relationship between sister-in-law and brother, that's when she had had enough. So again, I know it's a strong word, Brittany, but what is your take on this emergence of, I would say, really key evidence, not just from Lady Elizabeth and the late Queen's cousin, but also other people that we'll get into in just a moment through this new piece and reporting from Richard Kay in the Daily Mail. But to me, it is starting to now back up the sort of contemporaneous reporting that I was doing at the time in 2018. I need you to do something for me right now. It is free, it is easy, it is simple. Just hit that subscribe button on YouTube. That's because over 50% of you watching this video haven't done that yet.
Well, it's, I think, so great to have these stories coming out yet again, because it's important to go over sort of how Meghan responded to the royal family and how many divisions and conflicts that she was causing, because Meghan has really, really tried to paint herself as the victim in the scenario, when in fact she has been the villain in this whole royal family saga. And so I really like that these stories are coming out and reiterating some of the reporting that you had done, and that kind of grew over time and shows that in many ways, despite Meghan Markle's claims to the contrary, there were aspects of the press that were trying to protect her. But unfortunately, her behavior was so abhorrent that it just would not last forever. And Meghan is seeing the results of that all the time. And she's trying still desperately to rehab her image. And because if you look at everything that happened in her interactions with the Queen and Charles and William and Catherine and everyone, really, Meghan, despite all the money she's throwing at PR, will never resolve anything without, I think, reconciling with the royal family. Unfortunately, she cannot reconcile with Queen Elizabeth, but I think Her Majesty just saw Meghan and just knew that and felt after a while that Meghan was just marrying into the royal family for all the wrong reasons.
And Richard Kay, who is the editor-at-large of the Daily Mail, a long-time royal reporter, he was, of course, a confidant of Princess Diana, and I guess I would describe him as an establishment royal reporter. So he will tend to write about things when the royal family are ready for him to do so. And this new piece, Brittany, I think it's quite fascinating. We can go through it and analyze as we go. But it's headlined, "When Queen heard it was Harry on the phone, there was stony silence. Peerless royal expert Richard Kay sensationally tells for the first time exactly how Prince and Meghan blew relationship with his grandmother." And what's so interesting, Brittany, is that headline has actually come via the telephonist at Buckingham Palace. And I love this. I love this because so often, Brittany, it is those, what do people call them? You know, they're the backroom staff. Do you know what I mean? I hate the term servants. In the day, Brittany, they would have been called the servants. But, you know, they are the backroom staff who very much know how the royal family tick. They are uber loyal. But it was this quite small detail, Brittany, that the telephonist picked up, which just showed how much the late Queen didn't want to speak to Meghan. I found it fascinating. But let's go through it, Brittany, and just interrupt when you've got things to add. So Richard Kay writes, "Just the other day, a former Buckingham Palace switchboard operator was reminiscing about working for the late Queen Elizabeth. One afternoon, a call had come through from Prince Harry in the US, and he wanted to speak to his grandmother. The procedure was to ring the Queen's private number and let her know who was on the line. She would always thank you, and then you would connect the call and leave them to the conversation," the operator recalled. "But on this occasion, she did not. When I announced to the Queen that Harry was her caller, there was just a stony silence. In fact, it was so uncomfortable that I filled the silence myself by saying, 'Thank you, Your Majesty,' and then connected them." And Brittany, given we now know that the tone and the tenor of these phone conversations between Harry and the late Queen, and I have to give credit, by the way, to Angela Levin, who has always consistently reported here on Outspoken that Harry used to yell at the late Queen in these conversations, it makes so much sense.
Yes, and I'm sure she knew as well that when he was calling, it was just never anything good. He wanted something. He wanted to complain about something. Like, it was not a call that she ever looked forward to. And knowing my grandparents, they love it when I call. And so if you're getting to the point where your grandmother doesn't really want to take your call and feels forced to, that's just such a bad sign. But I can completely and utterly imagine Her Majesty on the other end of that phone going, "Golly, what mess is he wanting me to clean up now? What do him and his wife want? Like, tried to give them everything, and they're never satisfied." And not to mention the fact that they still now use their kids as a weapon against Charles, not letting him see them and not coming to the UK with them. And Harry demanding security that they can't actually give him. Like, that's not their power to do. And I just feel for the Queen so much there, that she used to have this wonderful relationship with Harry. And as we've heard as well from Lady Elizabeth, that he blew it up. He blew it up for his wife because he was a weak man and was more than willing to be led around her by her. And it's resulted in a catastrophic disaster that has consumed his life.
Well, indeed. And Richard Kay goes on, "This incident happened during the COVID pandemic, a time of considerable anxiety for the Queen. Her increasingly frail husband, Prince Philip, was nearing the end of his life, and the fallout from Harry and Meghan's decision to abandon Britain for a life of pampered exile had triggered a series of royal crises. Even so, the telephonist has never forgotten the moment, telling me it was memorable because the Queen would never not acknowledge you. To this long-standing and loyal servant," there's that word, Brittany, I just still don't like it, I'm sorry. I don't like it, we're in 2025, but there you go. "The absence of the usual courtesy was a direct result of the tensions and discord sown by the Prince and his wife." Then he moves on to talk about Lady Elizabeth Anson and these incredible revelations that have come directly from not just the Queen's late cousin, but also her BFF. And one of Lady Elizabeth's personal assistants has said to Richard she was rightly proud of her closeness to the Queen, but she was also very discreet and highly respectful. And Richard Kay goes on to report, "Nevertheless, it is that closeness and the Queen's reported views about the troublesome Sussexes which is crucial. After all, it is the question we all want to know the answer to. What did Elizabeth, and indeed Philip, really think of Harry's bride? Did she even like her? And how did her affection for a grandson to whom she was once devoted end up souring to the point where Lady Elizabeth confidently described the relationship with his grandmother as blown. Accounts of the drama surrounding the couple's Windsor Castle wedding, their subsequent departure, and the fallout between Harry and his brother Prince William are not new. And Harry, of course, has written a version of these events in his memoir, Spare, which conveniently skates over suggestions that his relationship with his grandmother and her staff was anything less than serene. What has been missing have been the views of those they left behind amid the wreckage of Megxit. Thanks to convention and a reluctance to play the couple at their own game, the Windsors have largely concealed their hurt behind a grim-faced royal rectitude. Initially, both Lady Elizabeth and the Queen were fans of the articulate and confident 36-year-old American actress who had won the prince's heart. According to Bidal Smith, Lisa thought Meghan poised, very natural, intelligent, and thoughtful, but added that she was clearly brighter than Harry and has to be careful not to overshadow him. Does this chime with the Queen's view? Richard Kay reports, I believe it does. When Harry first took Meghan to tea with his grandmother at the palace, a footman told me at the time that the Queen beamed at her staff, telling them how much she liked her. But when Lady Elizabeth made suggestions about the wedding, the actress, while full of charm, was unforthcoming. Harry subsequently wrote to this veteran of royal soirees explaining that they were going another way, adding, I am close to my grandmother and she is content with this. So, Brittany, that is critical, I think, to the historical point here, because of course what Meghan wants the world to believe, and let's just call it as it is, what she wants the world to believe is that this disdain towards her was coming from racism. And I'm very concerned, Brittany, that that's something that in the decades to come, if woke comes back, is something that could take hold. And the thing is, the late Queen Elizabeth II was the least racist woman on earth. I mean, look at her work in the Commonwealth. Look at the people who she loved most, Brittany, outside of her own immediate family. It was a lot of the leaders in Africa, and it was a lot of the leaders throughout the Caribbean. Okay, so to suggest that this woman is racist is absolutely absurd. And so I think this is what's important about this history here, and something that has been a little bit missed in the reporting of this. It's not just like the late Queen met Meghan and didn't like her. She loved her. She was beaming. She thought this woman was great. It was Meghan's behavior that changed the way the late Queen felt about her.
Yes, and when it comes to how Meghan really was absolutely atrocious in the lead up to her wedding, that is what soured so many on her. But I think the Queen, like you could say many people, initially they meet Meghan, they think she's great. But after a while, sort of the charm that Meghan puts on, I think, starts to reveal itself as sort of false to people. They start reading into it, going, I just don't know if she's being truthful here or not. And as Meghan became so demanding in the lead up to the wedding, I mean, to be quite frank, like Harry's book said, she was marrying the spare, and yet Meghan wanted to be treated like the Queen. She didn't want to put any of her ideas past the monarch. She wanted to keep her dress secret, allegedly, and so many different things that Meghan just showed throughout the whole process of the lead up to the wedding, that she had zero respect for not only Harry, but his grandmother, his father, the institution that she was supposed to represent and marry into. And I think Her Majesty felt that. I think they all did. And I actually think the whole royal family was actually very thrilled that Meghan had this mixed race heritage, because it helped with the Commonwealth. And that's why she made them the president and the vice president of the Queen's Commonwealth Trust, is that I think she really loved that and loved what that meant for the future. But it was Meghan's character that's always the issue. You can always go back to the Martin Luther King quote. You want to be judged by the content of your character, not the content of your skin. And what's basically happened to Meghan is that we judge her based on her character, and she has shown that over the years, and it's been reiterated again and again through reports and reports of alleged bullying and bad behavior behind the scenes, that Meghan is not the perfect saintly image that she tries to appear to be, but that she is actually in my personal opinion, not so great a person. And that's what the royal family came to believe rather quickly. They were probably hoping that her diva behavior was just for the wedding and that it would, once they were married, it would dissipate. But it just got worse. And they wanted to. They gave Harry what he wanted despite their reservations. And so that Harry and Meghan complain at all about the royal family's treatment of them is just an absolute joke.
And Richard Kay goes on, reporting that Lady Elizabeth Ansome had said, when I spoke with the Queen, she said she is not at all content. Plainly upset, the socialite added what turned out to be a prophetic observation. Meghan could turn into nothing but trouble. She sees things in a different way. By now, the Queen was also dismayed at developments. She was upset that Harry had asked the Archbishop of Canterbury to officiate the wedding without first obtaining the permission of the Dean of Windsor, the cleric in charge of the church where the ceremony was to be held. As a high society event planner herself, Lady Elizabeth understood only too well what an embarrassing situation this put the Queen in. Harry seems to think the Queen can do what she wants, but she can't, she told Beadle Smith. On the religious side, it is the Dean of Windsor's jurisdiction. As a result, Lady Elizabeth told the writer, Harry has blown his relationship with his grandmother. This failure to follow protocols had made the Queen really upset. She said she was shocked when the Queen told her how much this had saddened her. In her blog, her Substack, her amazing Substack, Beadle Smith quotes Lady Elizabeth saying that Harry was rude to the Queen for 10 minutes. This originated in a polite inquiry from the Queen about the wedding dress, and Meghan wouldn't tell her. Her distress was not just at the lack of candour and bad manners of the couple, but the lack of respect shown as a monarch. Towards the end of April, with the ceremony only 8 weeks away, Harry and the Queen were said by her confidant to have patched things up. She told the prince that she felt left out of the wedding plans, and her grandson subsequently wrote her a letter about what was happening. Asked if Meghan was being bossy, Lady Elizabeth told Beadle Smith, so I gather very much so. The implication is that this must have been relayed to her by the Queen. 2 weeks before the wedding, the hurt had clearly returned to Her Majesty, and with it the most devastating assessment. The jury is out on whether she likes Meghan. The Queen's cousin is quoted as saying, my Jemima is very worried. Harry is besotted and weak about women. We hope, but don't quite think she's in love. We think she engineered it. It's worrying that so many people are questioning whether Meghan is right for Harry. The problem, bless his heart, is that Harry is neither bright nor strong, and she is both. Now, Richard Kay goes on to say, Brittany, what makes these disclosures so compelling is that the Queen was always cautious about what she said about the couple because they were so sensitive to any criticism. However, it was to Lady Elizabeth that the Queen made her only publicly revealed remark about the wedding, which was that the bride's Givenchy gown was too white. In the monarch's view, it was not appropriate for a divorcee getting remarried in a church to look quite so flamboyantly virginal. And Brittany, I know that is true, because another piece of my very early reporting in regards to this, which remember only became public after the wedding, I only went public with this in November 2016, but it was utterly categorically true, was that the late Queen was horrified that Meghan was wearing a veil to the wedding because she was a divorcee. And you'll remember when Camilla remarried Charles in that 2005 ceremony, out of respect for the Queen, Camilla was not in white, Brittany, and she did not wear a veil. But Meghan didn't give a damn what the Queen thought about these important traditions.
No, and it's quite startling when you think that Harry and Meghan didn't want to tell the Queen anything about the wedding dress, anything they tried to keep, and they really have kept their honeymoon a secret. Like they refused to tell family members where they went. And the whole thing is that Harry's family is paying for the wedding. They're paying for the dress, and she refuses to give them any information about it because she knew they wouldn't approve. And I don't see what Meghan's whole reservation is about. Let's say the thing is, when you marry into an institution like the monarchy, they're not immune to new ideas, but you have to be within the institution, learn how it functions, and then you can propose new ways of doing things. What Meghan did from the jump is just go, I know better. We're going to do things my way because I'm better than you. And Meghan, I think she thinks she's quite bright. And I think Harry is pretty dim and she's much brighter than he is. And he just was led around by her. And he was looking, I guess, for not only a wife, but I think a mother figure in some twisted way. And so he definitely got that with Meghan. But the catastrophic fallout, you just got to can't help but wonder, was it worth it at the end of the day for Harry to go through with this? Because he has wrecked his life in so many ways. He's wrecked his family relationships, lost time with his grandmother and grandfather who have now both passed. He might miss out on relationships and building a relationship again with his father, his brother, and all for Meghan. And really, was it worth it? I don't know, because if Harry had married somebody different, I think we'd be looking at an entirely different scenario here. And I think that's what every royal family member's concern was. None of them liked her by, I think, the wedding. All of them were like hearing the bad stories going on and they were concerned, and then they're in there in their service and Sarah's giving the funny eyes during the long sermon and they're just kind of giggling to themselves about it.
But the public
and
didn't know. That's the thing.
Yeah.
This wasn't a media creation. At this point, the public didn't know. And Brittany, just to pick up on one of your points, it's like Meghan should have been delighted, because if the late Queen had her way, Harry would never have been marrying a divorcee. She had already significantly modernized. You know, she didn't let her own sister marry the love of her life because of tradition. And if you just look once again at Camilla and Charles in those very happy wedding pictures, I mean, Camilla looked beautiful. She still wore a lovely headdress, right? And how important was it for you, Meghan, to wear a damn veil at your wedding, given that you're hardly a traditionalist, love, when it comes to nuptials, given your wedding with Trevor Engelson was full of everyone smoking pot? I mean, come on.
Well, and the hubris of Meghan, too. She put all the flowers of the Commonwealth on the edge of her veil. And the only royal I'm aware of who has put Commonwealth flowers on an outfit was Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth at her coronation. And so that gives you the level of hubris of Meghan's ego. And not to mention the fact that that veil was horrible. It only looked good maybe once or twice, but it got bunched, it got stuck because it was so
For years, the relationship between Queen Elizabeth II and Meghan Markle has remained one of the most debated topics surrounding the modern British royal family. Every new interview, memoir, or report seems to add another layer to an already complicated story. While many accounts focus on public appearances and official statements, others claim to offer a glimpse into what may have been happening behind palace walls. In recent discussions, renewed attention has been given to reports suggesting that Queen Elizabeth's opinion of Meghan Markle changed significantly over time. According to several royal commentators and journalists, the Queen's initial warmth gradually gave way to concern as events surrounding the royal wedding and the years that followed unfolded. It is important to note that many of these accounts are based on recollections from royal commentators, palace insiders, and individuals said to have known members of the royal family. Some of the details remain impossible to verify independently, and different sources have offered different interpretations of what happened. Nevertheless, these stories continue to attract enormous public interest because they attempt to explain one of the biggest royal controversies of recent decades. The discussion begins with a claim that the Queen's first impression of Meghan was overwhelmingly positive. According to several reports mentioned by the commentators, Queen Elizabeth welcomed Meghan into the royal family with genuine optimism. Rather than keeping her at a distance, it is said that she encouraged Meghan to meet experienced advisors and offered support as she adjusted to royal life. For many observers, this is an important detail because it challenges the idea that tension existed from the beginning. Instead, the commentators argue that any problems developed gradually rather than immediately. According to these reports, the Queen believed Meghan had the potential to become a valuable addition to the monarchy. As an international actress entering one of the world's oldest institutions, Meghan represented something new and different. Some believed her international profile and modern perspective could help the royal family connect with younger audiences and strengthen relations. At first, optimism appeared to outweigh concern. However, according to the commentators, that optimism did not last. They argue that as preparations for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's wedding progressed, senior members of the royal household allegedly began noticing signs that relationships behind the scenes were becoming strained. While much of the public remained focused on the excitement surrounding the upcoming royal wedding, reports later emerged suggesting that palace staff were experiencing growing challenges during the planning process. The commentators emphasized that these concerns were not widely reported at the time. Publicly, the engagement was celebrated around the world, with millions eagerly anticipating the ceremony at Windsor Castle. Behind the scenes, however, some royal writers have claimed that tensions were already beginning to surface. Whether those reports accurately reflect what happened remains open to debate. Another point raised throughout the discussion involves the Queen's deep understanding of the monarchy itself. According to the commentators, Queen Elizabeth viewed her role not simply as a position of privilege, but as a lifelong commitment built on duty, discipline, service, and respect for tradition. For more than 70 years, she dedicated herself to preserving the institution through changing political, cultural, and social landscapes. Throughout her reign, she witnessed enormous transformations, yet she consistently emphasized continuity and stability. The commentators argue that these values shaped the way she viewed every member of the royal family, regardless of age or status. From this perspective, joining the monarchy involved much more than marrying into a famous family. It required accepting centuries of tradition while learning how the institution functioned before attempting to change it. According to the discussion, this may have been where expectations began to differ. The commentators suggest that Meghan approached royal life with fresh ideas and a desire to modernize certain aspects of the institution. While innovation is not necessarily viewed as negative, they argue that introducing significant changes without first understanding established traditions may have created friction with senior royals. Again, these are interpretations offered by the commentators rather than confirmed historical facts. One recurring theme throughout the discussion is the importance Queen Elizabeth placed on relationships with palace staff. Numerous accounts over the years have described the Queen as someone who valued loyalty and professionalism from everyone working within the royal household. According to the commentators, reports alleging difficulties involving palace staff particularly concerned the Queen.